out here fighting for equality, legislating laws that's going to hold police officers accountable for their wrongdoing. My name is Fareed Abdullah. I am not just someone who wants to be in office, but a resident, a citizen, a black man who understands the pressures that happens to us each and every day. We are all unified as one body. Let's continue in this justice for equality. Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! Black Lives Matter! I just keep saying, as a citizen, as black man, I represent what you say. Our lives matter. Everyone's lives matter. Your vote matters. Things are different. Your vote matters. Your vote matters. I represent Southeast State. We're your people. We're here together. Shoulder by shoulder. Do your best. Socially distance as well. Wear your mask. Mask for the and stronger. Our president has a smile. Over 100,000 flowers. There's no accountability. No accountability. Our lives matter. been out here for years. I've been lives. Stand in solidarity with them. Never ending on their help. Thank you.
One of them, they completed their suit leak. In the pad. And it's hard to tell from this angle, but there's actually a phone right here, and I can't tell if it's Bob or Doug that's using the phone.
To rendezvous with the Russian functional cargo block, but you know, the next night it was just a perfectly smooth launch count. Everything just went like clockwork, and it set the stage for an awesome mission.
I think you told the press before you walked out, I think you were over there at astronaut crew quarters, we're going today. I'm wondering where's the source of that confidence coming from?
I just got a feeling, you know, you got to have a positive attitude. I watched a lot of weather down here supporting shuttle missions, and I'm hoping that those clouds over the I-95 corridor, that the Indian River keeps them west of us, and that stuff that's building offshore is far enough off that we can stay in an open window here at the Cape.
Good. Well, we got your positive vibe going, and we appreciate that. Jim, when you were down in the astronaut crew quarters and when they were suiting up, you got a second chance to visit with the astronauts. Kind of tell us about that, and what was their demeanor, what was their mood today?
So again, they seem loose. They were loose last time, they're loose this time. They're definitely ready to go. They're excited. They've been wanting to go for a long time now. I'll tell you one thing that I thought was a little interesting is, Bob Behnken was making fun of Doug Hurley because on Doug's last flight, they scrubbed 5 times before launching on the 6th time. So Bob Behnken seems to think that Doug Hurley is the problem in this case. But to see them joking about that as they're getting suited up, ready to go, yes, they're trained, they're ready, but they're also loose, and that's good to see because they're going to have to be on their game when we launch.
These guys are pretty impressive. Doug Hurley and Bob Behnken. I mean, Doug Hurley. Really, an incredible pilot. Bob Benken, he's got a PhD in mechanical engineering.
And he's a flight test engineer himself in the Air Force. Yeah.
Well, in your assessment, why are these guys the right stuff?
Well, this is a test flight, and you know we have great astronauts that are chemists. We have great astronauts that are botanists. We have really talented and diverse, a very diverse astronaut corps in general. But this is a test flight, and for a test flight, what do you want? You want test pilots. You want people that, for a living, they have made a living flying new things that have never been flown before. And Bob Benken and Doug Hurley are the two people that you would want in a test flight, and that's exactly what this is.
Bob, you're a pilot too. You want to weigh in on Doug Hurley? He seems like he's got the right mentality and smooth customer.
He's a naval aviator, a marine pilot, a test pilot. I'm all in. He's a great guy.
Yeah. And tell me a little bit about in terms of the Kennedy Space Center, right? So you've been here since 2007, right?
Now to turn to what we all know, the 2020 election will be one of the most, if not the most consequential election in American history. The person who emerges victorious on November 3rd will have the enormous job of firing up the American economy again and holding communist China accountable for their role in the coronavirus outbreak. Kimberly, why is President Trump the only choice, the only person who can make the American economy great again?
President Trump is the only choice to make America great again, and his economic policies are so clearly defined. It is so clear that with his leadership and protecting our businesses out there, whether they be small or medium or large, he's got our back. And so many of our APA communities are small business owners. And so we need to know that we will continue to have that protection for the next 4 years. That's why I'm supporting President Trump, because he has a strong record on supporting businesses. Remember, he was the one who signed the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And Asian Americans are the largest beneficiary of this tax cut. They get about $2,500 for each of these cuts. And so we know that this works, and Asian American families have been preserved in their businesses. They are successful, and they're going to come out of this pandemic with great successes with the bold leadership of President Trump and his economic policies. We also acknowledge that so many of these Asian American families and their businesses have made America great in its economy. And so we acknowledge that, and we want to help them continue to pursue their dreams. And I believe that we will be coming out of this very quickly, and our economy will be stronger than ever.
I agree with you there. And it's so interesting, $2,500 per person thanks to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. I thought the Democrats said that was all fake. Wait a minute. Oh my gosh, they're the worst. So many people in this country benefited from that. It's amazing.
And keep in mind, Joe Biden has been on the record saying that one of the first things that he will do as the new president will cut the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act as one of his first official duties. So that's a sad story.
Yeah, your taxes are going up if Sleepy Joe gets in there, but he was running for Senate last I heard, so maybe we're okay. Asian Pacific Americans are one of the fastest growing populations in the country. Sean, how critical of a role will Asian Pacific Americans play in deciding the 2020 election, and why is President Trump the clear choice for the Asian Pacific community?
Laura, without doubt, Asian Pacific Americans will play a significant role in 2020. APAs are the fastest growing minority electorate group. More than 11 million will be able to vote. That's 5% of the nation's eligible voters. We just have to make sure that as many APAs as possible are voting for President Trump. And why? He respects the successes of our community, the drive, the ambition. He's appointed APAs to his cabinet, like White House staff, judgeships, other prominent positions, others, FCC Commissioner Ajit Pai, former Ambassador Nikki Haley, and I could go on and on and on. But President Trump, as you mentioned already, grew the hottest economy ever in the world before COVID, in our history. Now we all need him to do it again. He's strong on issues we care about as APAs: education, protecting families, national security, and the military, cutting taxes, self-reliance, immigration, trade, the rule of law. APAs appreciate leaders like President Trump who keep their promises and get things done.
Yep, promise made, promise kept. It's President Donald Trump's way. Many Chinese Americans fled the communist grip of China to find freedom in America. Their stories are heart-wrenching. They understand the importance of standing up against communist China. Joe Biden, on the other hand, has never stood up to China, and he never will. In fact, he's been aligned with China his entire career, and his family has benefited heavily from it. How disastrous would Joe Biden be in dealing with China, and why is this so important to Asian Pacific Americans specifically? Kimberly, we'll come to you first.
Joe Biden is weak on China. There's no question on that. And we can't trust him on U.S. foreign relations with China. We know that he has family business ties, so follow the money. We also know that he is a Washington, D.C. establishment. He's the status quo. And for so many years, they have turned a blind eye and a deaf ear to the many problems that China has had. They are not fair players. We know this. And for so many years, this has gone on. And all of a sudden, Joe Biden comes out and says he's going to care about it. Well, he's got a record that shows he hasn't. And so I believe that, China needs to clean up their act, and President Donald Trump will make sure that they do that. They have manipulated currency, they have theft in intellectual property, and they violate human rights. Only Donald Trump can get that job done. We've already seen him start that process, and no one else can do that.
We need to make sure Joe Biden stays right where he is, in the basement, right? Sean,
That's
what do you
right.
think?
Yeah. I'll try to be brief, Laura. Joe Biden can't decide if he likes China or not. Or
That's right.
Maybe he just can't remember. I'm also, by the way, waiting for him to make another discriminatory remark saying, I ain't an APA because I'm supporting President Trump. Here's the thing with Joe Biden. He has no coherent strategy for China. President Trump, in stark contrast, has successfully leveraged concessions in trade, drug policy, security, and shown China that we just will not back down.
Yeah, in fact, President Trump has been talking about China for decades now and saying that something needs to be done about them. You contrast that with Joe Biden, who we all know the story, whose son flew over to China while he was vice president with him on Air Force Two and somehow got $1.5 billion investment from the Bank of China, which is run by the Chinese government. You tell me, what did they want for that money? We still don't know. President Trump has delivered record-breaking results for the American people, specifically Asian Pacific Americans. Sean, you have knowledge of the technology companies in Utah's Silicon Slopes, which employ many Asian Pacific Americans. How would a Joe Biden presidency rescind all of the progress made in the last 3.5 years and set back millions of Asian Pacific Americans?
Laura, I was general counsel for a tech company. I invested in and helped run tech companies. And so the thought of Joe Biden as president, while harrowing on many levels, is even more so when it comes to innovation. Much like his non-existent China policy, he has no technology policy either. He doesn't know the blockchain from a bike chain. Regardless of your party, regardless of where you stand, if you're a technology leader, you should be afraid. President Trump, on the other hand, has balanced innovation and privacy protection, data protection, without heavy-handed government interference, making sure that the government is protecting APAs while still allowing the free market to create millions of jobs, generate billions more in revenue, and give millions of APAs the opportunity to succeed and have the quality of life that they deserve.
Amazing. All right. Well, I want to say thank you so much to both of you, Kimberly and Sean. It's been a true pleasure to have you both on. I want to give you both an opportunity to share some final thoughts with the American people. Kimberly, you first.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. And really, it is such a wonderful honor to have the president and his administration honor the month of May as APA Heritage Month, and to also kick off this wonderful coalition so that we can send the message of the great successes that the APA community has had in this great country because of the freedom and opportunity and prosperity that our wonderful country offers. And it's a clear choice for me. I am going to be supporting President Trump because he has a strong record to continue to keep our country great. This is what these families came here for so many generations. And if we were to elect someone like a liberal Joe Biden, all of those freedoms would go away. And it would be a sad state of our country. And we would have leftist socialist policies across the states. We would also see taxpayer-funded abortions. We would see universal health care for illegal immigrants. I mean, the list goes on. So I am looking forward to using the rest of this year through November to help re-elect Donald Trump for president.
Love it, love it. Thank you so much for that. And Sean, last thoughts.
Sure. I'm a proud Asian Pacific Islander and the son of noble cultures, strong, melded with the greatest nation in the history of our world here in America. It is a tremendous birthright. It's a wonderful legacy. And I want to talk for just a second, Laura, about President Trump. I know the real Donald Trump like you do, not the one the media loves to portray and lampoon. I know the real one who prays for us. I know the real one who prizes patriotism and family above all else. I know the one who, when the cameras were off and no one was watching, asked me how my father was doing because he knew he had cancer. He gave me a signing pen to give to my dad, the same one that my dad recently had when he passed. At his bedside, his Bible and his Trump pen. President Trump has the best interests of APAs and all Americans at heart. And that's why I'm voting for him and asking each of you out there to vote for him as well. I want to get the APA community fired up and excited to re-elect Donald Trump.
Oh, wow. What a touching story. Well, we are sorry to hear about your dad, but thank you for the insight into our president. I do know him like you do, and you're right. I wish more people saw that side of him. So, Kimberly and Sean, thank you so much for being with us tonight, and thank you all for spending your night with us as well. All right, I want to thank our special guests, Elaine Chao, Kimberly Yee, and Sean Reyes for joining us tonight. And a special thanks to all of you, our incredible patriots at home, for tuning in. We'll see you all next time. How important family is to the Asian Pacific. Her citizenship at the age of 19, has a distinguished career in the public, private, nonprofit sectors. She was president and CEO of United Way of America, director of the Peace Corps, deputy secretary of transportation. She was also vice president of Bank of America and Citibank. She received her MBA from the Harvard Business School and is the recipient of 37 honorary doctorate degrees. I feel like I need to go back to school right now. She's been a tremendous advocate for the Asian Pacific American community. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, during his State of the Union address earlier this year, President Trump famously said, "Socialism destroys nations, but always remember, freedom unifies the soul." Throughout his time in office, President Trump has boldly safeguarded Americans' precious liberties. Why is safeguarding freedom and democracy so important to the Asian Pacific community? And why do you believe President Trump and the Republican Party reflect Asian Pacific Americans' values?
Because freedom and democracy spells opportunity. And Asian Pacific Americans are the one group that has the largest number of immigrants. And so 62% of Asian Americans were born elsewhere. And we came to this country seeking opportunity. And we want to make sure that everyone, regardless of their background, has an equal access to opportunity in our country. And that opportunity can only exist if we have a government that believes in the triumph of the individual, of the individual soul. So we are not part of some big category of people. We're individuals with individual dreams. And the Republican Party is all about individualism. And it's about freedom and democracy, which once again spells opportunity and the American dream. And that is so important to Asian Pacific Americans in particular.
And in contrast, Joe Biden and the Democrats have pivoted so far to the left that he has openly embraced socialism and will fundamentally change America as we know it. Asian Pacific Americans know all too well the many dangers of socialism, which leads to the destruction of families and communities and opportunity. Could you discuss how Joe Biden's and Democrats' socialist policies have discouraged Asian Pacific Americans away from supporting the Democrats, and maybe share with us why socialism is so antithetical to the Asian Pacific American community?
Number one, we're very family oriented, we're very achievement oriented, we're aspirational, and we want our children to go to the best universities in America. And right now there are social policies within universities across America that basically discriminate against Asian Pacific Americans. But what we want is we want the opportunity to compete on a level playing field on the basis of merit. And socialism is something that so many young people may think is really glamorous, but they don't really understand what that means. Socialism, it doesn't cater to the American spirit of entrepreneurialism, of freedom, and of opportunity. And for a lot of young people who think that somehow, socialism is going to provide everything for free, well, as Margaret Thatcher once famously said, socialism works great until you run out of other people's money.
That's right.
And so it's really important that we do more to educate others about the tremendous merits of the free enterprise system, which has brought this country and everywhere else in the world such a heightened standard of living. And so this is an election of great consequence. It really is a battle between socialism and the free enterprise system.
Symbolic of
and
decades and generations of
for everyone who cares about
pain,
opportunity,
of anguish,
we want to have opportunity.
Much like we failed to hear George Floyd as he pleaded for his life as the world watched, by people sworn to protect him, his community, our state. Philando Castillo, silenced, unheard. This has always been so many other friends, brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, senselessly died in our street. Their voices went unheard, and now generations of pain is manifesting itself in front of the world. And the world is watching. One of the first people I called after seeing the video was Valerie Castillo, Philando's mother. We've become friends since the killing of Philando. And for those watching today who aren't familiar, Philando died in front of his loved one and his child, and left them behind, and left behind a grieving mother who has become an advocate for justice, an advocate for reform, but more importantly, an advocate for kindness and decency. And when I talked to Valerie, she said first and foremost, seek justice, seek fairness, and reach out and show kindness. What the world saw last night was not that. What the world has witnessed since the killing of George Floyd on Monday has been a visceral pain, a community trying to understand who we are and where we go from here. I'm joined today by Attorney General Ellison, by Major General John Jensen, the Adjutant General of the Minnesota National Guard, Colonel Langer of the Minnesota State Patrol, and Commissioner John Harrington. I spoke this morning with Reverend Jackson, who, much like Valerie, said a prayer for our state, said a prayer for over those grieving, said a prayer for peace, and then also said something very important. This is the moment where we start, but every time we get to this place, we never start the process to make sure it doesn't happen again. And that commitment amongst leaders in our community, watching this happen across the United States, watching another name be added, and for those of us who are old enough, to Rodney King, to Mike Brown, and unfortunately now we've added George Floyd. The situation on the ground doesn't allow us at this time to tackle those issues. The very assets in our community, our libraries, our businesses, those nonprofits and government entities, our light rail system, are all shut down from this. We have to restore order to our society.
We're sick of all the bullshit.
Addressing the issues. Before we turn back to where we should be spending our energy, making sure that justice is served swiftly, and that we learn something from what George Floyd gave on Monday. Now I want to just be very clear, and I'm going to have the team talk about what transitioned last night when the state assumed responsibility over the security near the 3rd precinct, where the state secured critical assets, and where the plan going forward to ensure that tonight our buildings do not burn, our citizens are secure. To create allows us to get back to the conversation of serving justice and making sure that we're not adding to that list of unheard names. And I want to be very clear and speak to that community. The very tools that we need to use to get control, to make sure that buildings aren't burned and the rule of law collapses, are those very institutional tools that have led to that grief and pain. I understand clearly there is no trust in many of our communities. And the differentiation between the Minneapolis Police Department that we witnessed losing trust of those they're there to serve is very difficult for people to make for those standing up here with me. I understand that. And I will not patronize you as a white man without living those lived experiences of how very difficult that is. But I'm asking you to help us. Help us use humane way to get the streets to a place where we can restore the justice, so that those that are expressing rage and anger and demanding justice are heard, not those who throw firebombs into businesses that our communities of colors have worked so hard to build back up areas that were blighted at one time and are thriving because of their entrepreneurship and their hard work. A library in an area where our children, as we know, are institutionally put behind, and the achievement gap for our communities of color is a shame on this state that we continue to admire by talking about and don't repair it. And that tool to help with that burned last night. So I want to just call out very, very clearly, as we put a presence on the street to restore order, it is to open that space to seek justice and heal what happened. I will not in any way not acknowledge that there's going to be that pain, but my first and foremost responsibility to the state of Minnesota is the safety and security of all citizens. We cannot have the looting and the recklessness that went on. We cannot have it because we can't function as a society, and I refuse to have it take away the attention of the stain that we need to be working on is what happened with those fundamental institutional racism that allows a man to be held down in broad daylight, and thank God a young person had a camera to video it, because there's not a person here or listening today that wonders how many times that camera's not there. These are tough questions. These are things that have been brewing in this country for 400 years. We have people out there putting themselves on the line to try and put out fires in our firefighters that are under attack. Those are the things I'm asking you. Help me restore that order. We will do that under state leadership and state guidance. You will hear directly from them of once that decision was made around 12:15 last night, and that first mission was executed around 3:45 at the 3rd precinct, we will see a difference. So I'm asking you, and you'll hear from them, to talk about this. I also want to think about what happens when we don't have that. People who are concerned about that police presence of an overly armed camp in their neighborhoods that is not seen in communities where children of people who look like me run to the police, others have to run from. So I understand that that's out there. But last night I got a call from a friend and a dedicated public servant. Senator Torres Ray called in her district, and it was on fire. And there weren't any police there, there weren't any firefighters. There was no social control, and her constituents were locked in their house wondering what they were going to do. That is an abject failure that cannot happen. We must restore that order today. Senator Torres raised a great on these issues of inequities and making sure that people's voices are lifted up. But what she understands is none of us can lift those voices. None of us can tackle these problems if anarchy reigns on the street. I also want to address an issue, and this one is on me, and I will own it. Earlier this morning, when this mission was carried out under my direction to resecure the 3rd Precinct, to do so in a manner which I am proud of how it was executed by this team, no injuries and no loss of life, a reestablishment to put the fires out for those businesses. A CNN reporter crew was arrested by the State Patrol. A few minutes after hearing that, I was on a call with CNN President Jeff Zucker, who demanded to know what happened. I take full responsibility. There is absolutely no reason something like this should happen. Calls were made immediately. This is a very public apology to that team. It should not happen. And I want to be clear for those of you listening. I think our Minnesota's reporters know this. I am a teacher by trade, and I have spent my time as governor highlighting the need to be as transparent as possible and have the press here. I failed you last night in that. And it does not escape me that we are here on the catalyst that lit this spark by what happened with a police detainment of George Floyd, and the idea that a reporter would have been taken while another police action was in play is inexcusable. So to CNN, to the CNN team, to the journalists here, this is about having a plan, and that's what these folks are going to talk about. This is about having an aggressive approach to understanding what the community needs, to not coming in heavy-handed with them, but to create space where the story can be told. In a situation like this, even if you're clearing an area, we have got to ensure that there is a safe spot for journalism to tell the story. The issue here is trust. The community that's down there that's terrorized by this, if they see a reporter being arrested, their assumption is because something's going to happen that they don't want to be seen. And so that is unacceptable. We will continue to strive to make sure that that accessibility is maintained, that not only that, the protection and security and safety of the journalists covering this is a top priority. Not because it's a nice thing to do, because it is a key component of how we fix this. Sunshine, disinfectant, and seeing what's happening has to be done. So again, I appreciate President Zucker's call. I appreciate his understanding in a situation that he was rightfully incredibly angry, and that falls squarely on me. That apology has been issued, and I think going forward to make sure it doesn't happen again. It's time for us to clean our streets. It's time for us to execute today in a way that shows respect and dignity to communities. I'm going to ask for a lot of help today of those folks who want to see it. It is my expectation that justice for the officers involved in this will be swift, that it will come in a timely manner, that it will be fair. That is what we've asked for. I have been in contact with Hennepin County Attorney, and I am confident that those very things I just said will happen. We will continue at the BCA to do a fair, a full, and a swift gathering of all of the evidence involved. But I would reiterate again, for so many of us, not all that's done in every other case where all of that evidence is gathered before, and I would ask that the swift justice be carried out. So Minnesotans, your pain is real. The chapter that's been written this week is one of our darkest chapters, and we can choose a few things. We can choose to try and get past this. We can choose to put a force out there and stop things from happening. We can hope that in the midst of COVID-19 or something else, it passes by and we don't have to turn that mirror to look at the harsh reality of those underlying gaps, whether it be healthcare disparities, whether it be educational disparities in our communities of color, whether it be policing disparities in our community of color, whether it be wealth acquisition in our communities of color, are all very real. We pride ourselves on a state of openness. We pride ourselves on a state of being friendly. I've talked a lot about One Minnesota. That wasn't on display last night. I don't naively think everything heals and you to the forefront and you say it'll be better. This is a community that demands and should expect more than words. They should expect results. Lieutenant Governor Flanagan and I have tried to make equity the center of everything we've done. But obviously in Minneapolis on Monday night, there wasn't a lot of equity for George Floyd. His family is probably wondering where the One Minnesota is for them. And that's on us as Minnesotans, us as the governor and the team that works with me to put the things in order to establish order in our streets, to establish and rebuild trust in our communities, to lift those voices up, to be heard, not pleading for their lives, but demanding the changes necessary so no one else is put into that position. So I would like at this time to turn it over to Minnesota's Attorney General, Keith Ellison.
Governor, thank you. Martin Luther King said many years ago that riot is the way that the unheard get heard. He didn't condone it, but he said to the nation, as a person who always protested peacefully, that don't just dismiss that and ignore it and relegate it to just criminality and bad behavior. Actually ask yourself, what's going on there? And is it something that we as a society absolutely must pay attention to? I think we must pay attention to it. I'd like everyone to recognize the fact that the National Guard just a week ago was administering COVID-19 tests to help people. The presence you see on the street, don't react to them the way you might react to the Minneapolis Police Department. It's not the same group. They have different leadership, different authority, and their job is to try to bring peace and calm back again. Please remember that this is not the group that you associate with unfair conduct, but it's a group that, in fact, just a week ago was trying to make sure that Minnesotans could survive and thrive and live, because we are still in the middle of a pandemic. It is that sense of service where they get involved when it comes to natural disasters, storms, floods, rains, diseases. Now they have to restore order on the streets. And I hope that the community who is protesting will protest peacefully, but not see this as another occupation by another military force. It really is make sure that there's calm and peace and that everybody can operate peacefully. So please accept it as that. I'm asking that of our community. It is essential, and I've said this before, everybody keeps asking the question, when? And this is a perfectly legitimate question. It is important to know that under Minnesota statutes, the primary jurisdiction for criminal prosecution is with the county attorney in which the offense occurred. And I believe that the message has been sent and received that the wheels of justice must turn swiftly. Not unjustly, expeditiously, thoroughly, fairly, but swiftly. It is important that people have confidence that accountability, no matter who you may be, is how we live in Minnesota. Let me also say that this prosecution, this investigation, this criminal process is important, and and the whole country and the whole world's looking at it, cannot solve the problem. As the governor so eloquently said, events like this start and they come to a conclusion, but we never start the process of real reform. I will submit to you that myself and Commissioner Harrington, under the leadership of the governor, have already started a process on the working group on preventing and reducing deadly force encounters with the police. We have a report that we want attention from the legislature and the entire community on, to focus on that so that we can really get to the bottom of this when it comes to issues of use of force, when it comes to officer wellness, when it comes to community healing, and a whole range training issues, all kinds of things that bear on this issue. And it's not just those things. I believe that the real work of our working group is the implementation of this, and that really begins in earnest now, and is more important now, I think, than ever. So I just want to, as I conclude my remarks, I want to say that we have to have a situation where Lake Street, a precious jewel of our state, is a place where Minnesotans can walk again, where businesses can be safe again. But I want to be clear that if the message was, this situation with Mr. Floyd is intolerable, absolutely unacceptable, and must change, that message has been sent and received as well. And the governor, myself, the lieutenant governor, all of us are committed to that long-term change. And I can tell you that I spoke with many legislators who feel the exact same way. People in the philanthropic community feel the exact same way. So I think we're going to do some real changing. We're not just going to fix the windows and sweep up the glass. We're going to fix the broken, shattered society that leaves so many people behind based on their historical legacy of being in bondage and servitude, then second-class citizenship, and now fraught with disparities from everything from incarceration to housing to wages to everything else. And so with that, I want to hand it over to General Jensen, Major General Jensen, who will further elaborate. Thank you very much.
Good morning. I'm Major General John Jensen. I'm the Adjutant General of the Minnesota Army National Guard, and I've been the Adjutant General since November of 2017. And what I'm going to describe this morning very quickly is the actions of the Minnesota National Guard since we were mobilized under the Governor Walz's executive order. Like many Minnesotans, I woke up yesterday morning to the news that the Minneapolis mayor had requested National Guard support. The only difference was I opened up my phone and there was a text from Commissioner Harrington. It wasn't the newspaper or the morning news that notified me of that. So immediately yesterday morning, I made contact with the commissioner, and we began planning on the potential employment of the Minnesota National Guard in support of Minneapolis. For those of you that may not understand how emergency management works in Minnesota, I'm just going to take a quick moment and explain that. In Minnesota, county emergency management coordinators, or the mayors of Minneapolis, St. Paul, Rochester, and Duluth, may request National Guard support through the state EOC. So in accordance with that, Minneapolis Mayor Frey made that request to the Minnesota National Guard. What traditionally comes with the request, though, is a layout of capability needed and exactly the problem that's trying to be solved. Typically, the request for the Guard and that type of information come at the same time. Sometimes it lags. So when it lags, what we do is we begin preparing for an unknown mission. But in this case, we sort of knew what we might be doing as it related to civil disturbance in Minneapolis. But it's very important that we know exactly what we're being asked to do, so we make sure that we have the right equipment, We mobilized the right number of soldiers and the right number of soldiers and airmen to support those soldiers that are going to conduct the mission. That element was lacking. But with the governor's decision to allow me to continue to plan, we began notifying soldiers early yesterday morning of a pending mission. Once we notified our soldiers, again with the governor's verbal approval, we began mustering our soldiers and moving them into the metro area, knowing that the most likely probability of employment was going to be Minneapolis. As we met as a senior team yesterday afternoon, the one topic that continued to be discussed was the lack of clarity and the lack of a mission and a description of what exactly the Minnesota National Guard needed to do. My concern to the governor was twofold. One, I didn't know what special equipment I might need to accomplish the mission.